You're watching Celtics Today by Chat Sports, and before we get started on today's show, I just want to say thank you to all of you for subscribing because over the weekend, we finally did it. We surpassed 5,000 subscribers, but we're not done here. Let's continue to grow the channel. And if you're watching this asking, why should I subscribe? Well, with the NBA playoffs coming up in about a month, we're going to continue to cover the Celtics, pushing out multiple videos every week. And the NBA draft, yeah, it's in July, but it's never too early to look ahead and start scouting some of these draft prospects that could be available for the Celtics in the first round. So subscribe to the channel, hit that big red button down below, and go to youtube.com/CelticsTV. Welcome into Celtics Today. I am your host, Chase Sr. Let's kick it off with Brad Stevens because over the weekend, Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN made a report and came out and said that Indiana University offered Brad Stevens the bag. According to Woj, the Hoosiers were ready to double down and offer Brad Stevens a 7-year deal worth around $70 million. If I was Brad Stevens, I'd think long and hard about that deal because that is a lot of money. And we're going to explore this further coming up. But why was Brad Stevens linked to Indiana as well as the UNC jobs? Well, the Indiana, to be specific, Brad Stevens grew up and went to college in Indiana. He also coached at Butler and brought the Bulldogs to back-to-back Final Fours. Now, Brad Stevens has since come out since Woj made that report on Saturday and has denied it. And Indiana, they ended up happy because they hired Mike Woodson, who had a lot of success in the NBA and also went to Indiana back in the day. This is what Woj had to say about IU offering Brad Stevens a lot of cash. Quote, "Stevens did not entertain it. Leaving the Boston Celtics for a college job, it doesn't make sense. He's in that high $6, low $7 million a year range anyway." So I ask you Celtics fans, if you were in Brad Stevens' shoes, what would you have done if Indiana came up to you and said, hey, 7 years, $70 million, we're going to offer you this opportunity to turn this Hoosiers program around and make them relevant again, really for the first time since Bob Knight? Type G, if you would have gotten the bag. Type B, if you would have stayed in Boston. Look, I know that money is really hard to turn down, and I had said I'd think long and hard about accepting the bag. But the Celtics job at the NBA level is a great gig. In fact, it's a fantastic gig. I'd make the argument that the head coach of the Boston Celtics might be the most revered job in the entire NBA. And this is why. And I think this is why Brad Stevens elected to stay with Boston. This is a historic franchise. This is the preeminent franchise across the NBA. 17 championships, tied for the most with the Los Angeles Lakers, even though there's a little bit of a discrepancy there because they didn't all happen in Los Angeles. And when you look at the Celtics franchise, really since its inception, they have provided coaches and the organization with resources to be successful. And this is also one of the most passionate fan bases in the NBA. So year in and year out, Danny Ainge or whoever's running the front office is going to do whatever they have to do to put a competitive team on the court. And for Brad Stevens, can you be in a better position than having two superstars on the wing? I think you win NBA championships and you compete for them with elite wing players. And for Brad Stevens, he has two of them with Jason Tatum, who I think is a bona fide superstar right now, especially with the way that he's been playing, as well as Jaylen Brown, who over the years has progressed at an unbelievable level. So you have two stars if you're Brad Stevens, which puts you in the thick of things to really compete for NBA championships for the next several years. And I am personally a competitor. If I'm Brad Stevens, if I'm in my current job, I want to work at the top of my profession, and I think you guys all should agree with me on that. You want to work with the best, you want to compete with the best, and you want to be around some of the elite people, whatever your profession is, and that's what Brad Stevens is doing with the Celtics. Can't find a better job than the Boston Celtics, and Brad Stevens made the right choice in staying with Boston because, as you see, this team is really hot right now. They've won 8 of 10, and they're making a run up the Eastern Conference standings, and they figure to be a pretty dangerous team come playoff time. Let's get to how the Celtics have been playing of late. They lost to the Chicago Bulls last night on Monday as we record this on a Tuesday. Jason Tatum finally cooled off, going 3 of 17 from the floor, even though Jaylen Brown did go off. But the Celtics, they've found a form of consistency given they've been dealing with all of these COVID issues this season, and they are currently a half game out of fourth place in the East. So let's take a look at the Eastern Conference standings right now. There are the Celtics, 31-27. They're starting to find their footing just a bit and find a form of consistency which has been missing from this team for a long time. As for the teams that are on the Celtics' heels, the New York Knicks are soaring, playing great basketball under Tom Thibodeau. They're at 31-27. I think the Celtics are firmly entrenched in that 4-5 spot in the East, and if they get to the fourth spot in the Eastern Conference, I think they're in a really favorable position come playoff time. So will the Celtics get that aforementioned 4 seed? Type Y for yes or type N for no. I'm going to go ahead and say yes because I think this team is playing really well right now. And as long as Jason Tatum continues to display his aggressiveness, that has really helped him become an elite player over the last couple of weeks, I think the Celtics are going to be just fine. Celtics Today is brought to you by our friends at Newsbreak, and I'm pumped to tell you about our partner because this is an app that I use every single day. I was with some friends over the weekend, and we were having a conversation about a bunch of kind of current event topics that are going on in the world right now, and I came across as a pretty educated dude, and my friends had asked me, Chase, I mean, you cover the NBA and the NFL for Chat Sports. How do you stay on top of all of these other issues? And I said, you know what? The Newsbreak app, because on one single feed, I'm able to see my local news, weather, and crime, politics, pop culture, food, and entertainment, as well as my sports and Celtics content. And the cool thing is you type in your zip code and you'll be updated as to everything that's going on in your specific neighborhood on one single feed as well. And speaking of the Celtics, we have a Celtics Today page on the Newsbreak app. So you can either check us out on YouTube or on Newsbreak. You go to chatsports.com/CelticsNB, search Celtics Today, and give us a follow because we're trying to get to triple-digit followers. Do that right now by going to chatsports.com/CelticsNB. You're watching Celtics Today by Chat Sports. I am Chase Sr. Let's get into Jabari Parker because we weren't able to touch on him signing with Boston last week because it happened late on Friday. Signed with the Celtics after being waived by the Kings after playing only 27 minutes in 3 games this entire year. And as we've seen in Jabari Parker's 2 games with Boston so far, he has shown some potential as a bench scorer for this team. And with Evan Fournier's future status unknown as he continues to battle the coronavirus, Jabari Parker has kind of stepped into that role and been a productive player in 30 combined minutes over 2 games with the Celtics. Here are his numbers in his debut against a Warriors team that is white hot right now thanks to Steph Curry, who is just unconscious. He impressed me. 15 minutes, 5 of 6 from the floor, 11 points and 4 rebounds. And then last night in a loss against the Chicago Bulls, once again got 15 plus minutes of burn, 4 of 7 from the floor for 8 points and a single rebound. And as I went back and watched how Brad Stevens used Jabari Parker, I kind of put together a scouting profile of what stood out to me about a guy who, coming out of Duke, was looked at as a generational prospect at the time, going number 2 in the NBA draft, and he hasn't developed into that player because injuries have certainly zapped him. Tore his ACL during his rookie year, which was really a shame. Tore his ACL again, and throughout his entire career, he's been off injured. But how has Brad Stevens used him in the last 2 games? Primarily as a screener because he's a big body. He's still athletic enough where he can roll off those screens, and surprisingly, he's been used a lot on post-ups through 2 games. Used primarily down low. Occasionally, he's made some cuts toward the basket off the wing, but Jabari Parker, I think he's going to be used primarily down low for Brad Stevens, and this is what I'm thinking. I think that Parker, who's only still 26 years old, which is kind of crazy to think about because it feels as though he's been in the league forever, I think going to a contender, being in an environment that is sustainable in terms of winning, I think that could re-energize Parker because really throughout his career, he hasn't played for an organization that's as classy as the Celtics and consistent in terms of winning like the Celtics. And this is what Stevens had to say about Parker's role, which I guess it appears isn't going to just be for the remainder of the season. Stevens, quote, "We saw it as an opportunity to not only sign a guy for the rest of the season, but also next year. We want to do our part to certainly make our team better and in certain situations and certain matchups, especially as the season wanes here, but also to help him get his groove back." Parker said this about joining Boston. Most importantly, I've just been a fan of the Boston Celtics. They just do things the right way as far as like the teamwork, the hard work, and preparation. And hopefully I can be integrated and rub off on those guys as far as their work ethic and their habits. That's what I'm talking about when I say that Parker can be re-energized. Imagine if you're in your current job right now and you're working for a company that's in flux, and the work environment, the culture there, it just sucks to go to work every single day. That's not going to bring the best out of you as an employee. And I think that's affected Jabari Parker throughout his NBA career. Now he goes to a place with a couple of superstars, a really good coach, and an organization that is willing to spend and provide Brad Stevens with resources to put a really good team on the court. I think that rubs off on players and it re-energizes them and makes them realize, hey, I got to step my game up and it's going to bring the best out of me as a player. So you heard Brad Stevens say, I think Jabari Parker can only help us this year, but next year. Celtics fans, what do you think about that? Do you see Jabari Parker as a long-term fit for the Boston Celtics? Get into the comments, hop on board and join the show. Type L for yes, he's a long-term fit, or type S for short-term.